Much. So, good afternoon to everyone. I would like to thank everyone for this very interesting conference, the organizing committee, and also every speaker that shared very interesting insights. So, I will also talk about trade diplomacy and commercial corridors. And I'm here to present my ongoing research project, which focuses on the resurgence of trade diplomacy and specifically the renewed interest by state actors in the constructions of such corridors. Great. So basically, corridors today, they are not just trade routes, they are tools of strategic influence. And of course, this is not a new phenomenon. Trade routes have historically served as channels for not just goods, but ideas, religions, and also cultures. And today, this logic is resurfacing in a modern way, which is basically what we're witnessing is that nations are making vast investments in ports, railways, pipelines, and highways. And they're not used simply as infrastructures, but they are seen as strategic tools for influence and diplomacy. And what is particularly interesting for me is that the current wave of corridor diplomacy is not being led by traditional powers, but rather by emerging powers. And this is thanks to the more fragmented geopolitical landscape in which we live in which some specific actors they exploit what is being called strategic ambiguity, and they position themselves between camps, leveraging partnership that allow them to avoid full alignment and challenging in this way the standard conception of the global order. And this brings me to the core of my research, and I try to address this phenomenon looking at by the theoretical lens of international political economy, drawing particularly from Richard Rosecrans' rethinking of state power in the 1980s. And basically, what Rosecrans provides is an historical rethinking of state power, arguing that modern states have shifted their focus from territorial conquest to the control and expansion of trade networks, where economic interdependence is basically elevates commerce to become a central pillar of national security strategies. And I believe that corridor represent a new arena for this kind of competition, because trade as a means of diplomatic influence and national emancipation has become the core of emerging power strategies to carve out a role in today's increasingly multipolar order. So when we talk about corridors, we all are accustomed with the golden standard, which is the China's Belt and Road Initiative. And since its launch in 2013, China has signed agreements with over 150 countries. And the project has served China's interest not merely as an economic development project, but also as a strategic tool for extending Beijing geopolitical influence beyond its regional borders. And the scope and dimension and also the impact that the BRI had makes it a cornerstone against which all other modern corridor projects can be compared. So there is a debate on Belt and Road Initiative. Its record is mixed because on the one side we can say that it has transformed connectivity across Asia and also Africa, but it has also triggered debt crisis in some countries. It has a strained local governance system across other regions, and it has also sparked allegations of a neo-colonial approach targeting Beijing, which is exactly the opposite of the Chinese official narrative regarding the project. So there is a debate within the academia, and of course this debate is also affecting global politics at a political level. But and the question is is the Belt and Road Initiative being successful? And by successful, I mean, has it tilted the global economy toward China, like in China's favor? This is still an open question, but what we can say for sure is that the Belt and Road Initiative has attracted the interest and, more importantly, the reaction of most of Beijing counterparts, regardless of their global positioning. And when I mean the reaction, I'm talking about the alternative corridors that are emerging on the global trade scene. You can see in this map the blue arrows. They refer to the so-called IMEC, and the orange arrows that go through Iraq and Turkey is the so-called Turkey Iraq Development Road Project. So on this side, we can say that that the BRI has been successful, because what it has done, it has redefined how corridors are used, has tools of influence, and has motivated other actors to respond in kind. And so if we look at IMEC, we see that there are some tendencies that repropose themselves. IMEC was announced in 2023, and it aims to link India to Europe via the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. And the main point of IMEC, its like strategic relevance, is that the corridor aims to cut transport time by 40% compared to maritime routes like the Suez Canal. But I'm interested at looking at corridor from the perspective of their launching state. So if we look at India, we can say that by launching itself in the design of this mega infrastructural project that encompasses 3 continents and requires substantial investments, New Delhi aims to position itself as a new center of gravity within an increasing multipolar world. India wants to project itself on its immediate neighborhood and beyond its region. And in order to do this, what Delhi is trying to do is to maximize the 2 guidelines that steer its strategic positioning policy, which are basically, again, non-alignment in the global arena and countering China expansionism in the Indo-Pacific. But India's shift also impacts other actors, and in particular the West, because what the West increasingly views India as a reliable partner for the friendshoring activities. So India is becoming a mean of diversifying supply chains away from China. And also IMEC allows the connection of the economic hubs of Europe and Asia, as well as all those regional cooperation initiatives which have been either encouraged or guided by the US. And this includes, for example, the 3 Seas initiative, the Greece, Israel, Cyprus cooperation in Eastern Mediterranean, and the E2U2, which is India, Israel, United States, United Arab Emirates Forum, which operates in economic and military domains. But engaging in corridor diplomacy implies gaining a direct and often undesired stake in multiple political crises. And indeed, IMEC faces considerable geopolitical risk because it traverses very volatile region. And just to make an example, the endpoint, which is Israel's Haifa port, is the link between the Gulf and Europe. And of course, this means going through a country that is actually waging conflicts. And on the other side, the success of IMEX depends on the normalization of bilateral relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, again, amid the ongoing war in Gaza. Then we also have a financial issue because the high cost of this new infrastructure, and I can mention the ports that are being built on Indian western coast or the rail links in the Gulf, they require stable investment environments, and these are very hard to guarantee under regional instability. So in short, we can say IMEC ambition is real, but its feasibility is deeply shaped by the surrounding geopolitical climates. If we look at Turkey-Iraq development roads, again, the corridor actually took a new relevance following the announcement of IMEC, because Turkey's position on IMEC has never been warm. President Erdogan, he declared that without Turkey there is no corridor because IMEC precisely cut off Turkey from the global supply routes. And indeed, Ankara perceives IMEC as a direct challenge to its historical role as a vital hub for goods transport between Europe and Asia. So in response to this, the Turkish government launched, together with Iraq, the Development Road Project, which is the former Dry Canal, which consists in a 1,200-kilometer network of railways and highways linking the Persian Gulf to Europe via Iraq and Turkey. And if we look at Turkey's rationale behind this, we see that it goes above commerce. Because, on the one side, the development road wants to reinforce the Turkish Middle Corridor vision and thus reclaiming transit centrality amid IMEC and the BRI competition. But also Turkey aims to leverage the economic benefits that will derive from the initiative to further strengthen its influence over its southern neighbors, and this means especially the Iraqi Kurdistan and the broader Levant, which following the fall of the Assad regime has actually seen a strong increase in Turkish influence. And then there is also an energy security dimension because the corridor would reduce the risk for energy goods because it would grant overland access from the Gulf to Europe bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. Even for this corridor, of course, there are very pressing risk, which basically are security risk because the corridor passes through volatile areas in which we have IS remnants. There is the still unsolved issues of Kurdish guerrilla fighters in the north of Iraq and pro-Iranian militias that still operate in the country, which are going to add to insurance and construction cost for the new infrastructure. Then we have logistical bottlenecks between Baghdad and Erbil government within Iraq because they still lack coordination among customs, land acquisition, and governance. And it's all before the project starts to be built. And then we have a financial issue because both Turkish and Iraqi economy, they are facing very dire pressure. And though we have actually Gulf investors active in the project, sustained finance is far from guaranteed. So again, we can say that the development road has a very strong geostrategic logic, but it's fragile from an economic and security perspective. So I'm gonna jump to my conclusion. Basically, another relevant point when we talk about economic corridors is that we still shouldn't see them only framed as national ambitions because they are embedded within a broader global interest. And especially for what concerns IMEC, the United States and the European Union, they clearly see it as a mean to counterbalance China and reduce their dependency on global supply chains. And the redundancy of trade routes is actually a very good news for Western actors because the development of competing large-scale initiatives means that the risks are spread across different regions, and this reduces the leverage of economic coercion and trade unfair practices. Also, we see that Gulf countries are investing in actually both projects because they also want to diversify logistics beyond the Strait of Hormuz. And this would secure new trade lanes. So the end point is that this external interest in the development of this project, they show how multipolarity is fueling new partnership, but also that the sustainability of these corridors actually depends on more than just geography. It depends on politics, it depends on finance, and it also really depends on the narrative behind it that sustain these corridors. So to conclude, the main point is that trade diplomacy is back and it's not a marginal activity, it's a central mode of geoeconomic competition. And also, the interesting element is that those that are leading the charge are emerging powers, which they seek to gain influence and autonomy by redesigning the global trade map. But this project actually comes with real constraints, which I've mentioned: governance bottlenecks, financial fragility, and regional instability. So the core question that remains unanswered and can also be a focus for further research is, can emerging powers turn corridor diplomacy from an aspiration into a sustained advantage? Thank you very much for your attention.